Good morning, everyone. I'm sure you're going to notice right away that I have a burnt out light bulb. I've already replaced 3. I'm trying to find the rest. Still with the top will light up. It's my brother's tree. He's got one of those old trees where if one light burns out, the whole thing doesn't work. Okay, today we're going to be diving in deep into Angkor Wat and the things that I discovered and where it led to from there. So here we go, and good morning, everyone. I just got out of the shower. My hair's a little wet. So here we go. I was recommended by Colum and Arthur, who's standfast, to please look into Angkor Wat. Actually, Arthur had asked me earlier, and then I kind of put it on the back burner because he's asking me a lot of things to look into. And then Colin was like, you need to look into this. And I'm like, okay, I'll look into it. So I started watching the Praveen on Angkor Wat, and all this stuff started flooding in. And so then I sat down one day and I thought, you know what? I can either sit and look into this deeply, or I can do it while I'm talking and go there while I'm talking now, because it's a lot easier for me to bilocate and go and see what I'm seeing while I'm talking, because I'll tend to forget stuff otherwise. It's like anything. It's like sitting in a classroom for 2 hours. How much you're going to retain? So here we go. Now, the first thing I saw, and I'm going to go in there now too, is that when I went to Angkor Wat, I looked around at the entire landscape and saw that there were pyramids everywhere. So Angkor Wat, right now, when I see Angkor Wat, it was built the same time the pyramids were built. It's all done at the same time. Okay, laying that foundation. So that means that Angkor Wat is much, much older than what they say it is, obviously. I also see at one time a big chunk of Angkor Wat with this reality was submerged. And that was a big flood event. And I see that this big flood event was one of several flood events. There wasn't just one. The most recent one was only several hundred years ago, but the Angkor Wat one was further back into time. So let's look at Angkor Wat and what it's all about. First off, Angkor Wat was like the pyramids. It was a electrical generating system, and it dealt again with the soil, it dealt with the air, and it dealt with the atmosphere. A generating system. All three. Looks like at that point when the pyramids and Angkor Wat were created, all these earthen technologies were in use, full and well, which came from a different part of the bigger earth. When this snow globe was established, and I will say established, because at one point there was nothing here. I had done a video on the bigger earth, and every single place like our snow globe is manipulated to be like a terrarium, whatever it's designated in, to be like desert, or if it's going to be tropical or what have you. So I'm going to step out of Angkor Wat for a minute and talk about these snow globes that are out there on the bigger earth and ours. At one point, when I look at Angkor Wat, all the temperature was evenly uniformed. There was no winter. There was no deep heat summer. Those did not exist. The way that it existed was like a literal terrarium, and it was universal inside of the snow globe, which is why people didn't have to wear heavy clothing, and they weren't fried from the sun simulator, which was the sun back then. But everything was regulated in our snow globe, and everything was run on this earthen technology, atmospherically, regenerating the water, what have you. What I did see that at one point after one of the main big floods, I'm going to say the real big one, the first one, the beings that were residing in Angkor Wat and the pyramids and all this, they went underground. And some of them went out of the snow globe to the bigger earth. And then when they would come back and they'd reestablish. It, almost like, okay, we know we have this amount of time frame and it can be utilized, but then we're going to do some kind of calendar and know that toward the end of this calendar, these big events are going to keep coming back because they're cyclical. So meanwhile, we can't establish here for a time frame, maybe a couple hundred years, maybe 100 years, depending on the cyclical events that happen naturally. And a lot of these are happening naturally. Angkor Wat, when I look into it, it looks like, just like in Rome or places like this, a lot of this area which has water in it, and underneath there's these like things. These were actually to sit on, baths. It was a big bath area. So you could go into the water and get regenerated. It's quite amazing. When I look at it, the water stays very high energized because of how the system is designed. There's like these things everywhere. They look like little mounds or something in the water. And those were actually where you would sit. It's amazing. Just like the baths in Rome or wherever. But I do know this. The beings that inhabited Angkor Wat and these pyramids, they were humans, just like us, except that they weren't diminished in their pineal gland, diminished in their abilities. They were not primitive. We're actually going backwards from what I'm seeing. They're making us more primitive, more primitive, more primitive, more primitive. When at this point, we were much more enlightened and had our abilities wide open. And they have shut us down, shut us down, shut us down. We were always taught that we came from caveman. No. In reality, they made us into caveman. By taking away our abilities physically in our mind, taking and cutting us from our heart to our brain, the logic and the emotional mover, and by severing that and then shrinking our pineal gland and then feeding us lies about reality, really keeping us off kilter about how everything really does work, taking us away from the earthen technologies that were there to heal in every manner. So when I'm looking at Angkor Wat and I'm seeing these people, let me describe the people. When I look into Angkor Wat, I'm seeing the people have a really dark tan looking skin, and some of them have blue eyes and green eyes. And it's like, wow. And they look very distinctive. I don't see many people in this reality that look like them. They have features of the Caucasian, but they have the dark skin, but they have the blue eyes and the green eyes, and yet they have the dark skin. And it's like they are the originals. And then somehow they got split to be what they are of modern day today, people from that area. They didn't look like they do now at all. A little bit, not much. It's like the Egyptians don't look like the people of today in the same area. They don't. So I'm going to say a lot of manipulation has taken place with the populace. So Angkor Wat definitely went through a flood. I had watched on Campbell, he had done a thing where he was talking about petrification that can be done with certain minerals. And there's these places that there it is, the example of things being petrified, like shoes and skates and bicycles. I'm seeing that a lot of Angkor Wat at one point was wood, and it got petrified and turned to stone. And that is actually an example across the entire snow globe where things have been petrified. So now let's look at what happened to Angkor Wat after it became petrified after the flood. and then what came in afterwards. And this is where the Naga ended up coming into the scenario. So the people from Angkor Wat, when it was created, are not the same people. No, they're not. After the flood, that came in and inhabited Angkor Wat, a whole different section of people. And this is where the Naga, the snake people, came in and tried to help assimilate the population into a higher vibration because of the catastrophes, what have you, over the snow globe flooding out. The Naga are I guess reptilian, but they're not, they're snake people. And these snake people, believe it or not, are on a much higher vibration than some of the other reptilian species. Yeah. So when Praveen was going in there and you see a Buddha and there's a Naga standing behind the Buddha, it's because the Naga were the ones leading the way to Buddhism, to the higher aspect of reality, of that there's more than just this physical world, and to question everything. Very interesting. The Naga are a very, of course, old species, part of the bigger earth, and where they're resided, they don't have these catastrophes. They're in a more stable snow globe. So their generations or realities of whatever have not been broken like ours have been. Every time we have a reset, which is some catastrophe, we are broken as a civilization. It breaks our line of knowledge, it breaks our abilities, and then we can be manipulated even easier. It's terrible. But the Naga don't have this, so they can go back and back and back, and everything that they learn and they garner is tacked on and tacked on, so their base of knowledge is quite enormous, as ours would be if we weren't so broken. That's all I can say. I will tell you this, when I start looking out, and I started with Angkor Wat, and I saw the pyramids, and I saw this all coming in and being built, and it was literally built in days, the pyramids. And it was done through the mind, of course, obviously. I had thought at one time it was through machinery that could change the frequency of things, and that's only halfway true. I also see that with the mind, because the mind is everything, with that DNA activated, some of us don't even need tools to have levitation and change frequency, because that's all it is. It's a changing of frequency. And I see that when the pyramids were built, they literally, for lifting things, they literally changed the frequency here. And of course, that's our source. Because if you go down to our source, which that's what we are, we have all of these abilities within us. Of course we do. It's just you have to tap into them. And a lot of them have been severed purposefully so we could be controlled. But interesting. I'm digressing. I'm all over the map. When I go and I look at this stuff, everything connects, and it's hard to focus on one little thing when everything is in connection with each other. I can tell you that I also see that when we're talking about, this is really going to be diverting off, we're talking about going to the moon. Every time someone says, we're going to go to the moon, we're going to the moon. Yeah, they're going, but they're not going to the moon. They're literally going out of this snow globe. I also see that there are expeditions, let's just call them that, where they definitely, when they're gearing up and everyone's doing all this to go to the moon, that's all happening because they are going somewhere. It's just not where you think they're going. And whenever they say the moon, just know that means outside of this snow globe. The moon AKA outside of this snow globe. That's what that means. So when everyone's doing all this work and you've got thousands and thousands of people working on going to the moon, well, yeah, they're going to the bigger Earth. They're absolutely going to the bigger Earth. And I can't stress that enough. NASA is really going to the bigger Earth. That is the moon they're talking about, and always has been. It's always been, okay, let's label it the moon because you can see this thing in front of you, but literally we're going outside of this snow globe. And the moon is outside of this snow globe, the bigger Earth. And it's always diversion. I'll have you look in here, and meanwhile, I'm doing this over here. So absolutely NASA is doing all of that, but it's not to go to this moon. It's to go to the bigger Earth. I wanted to throw that in there too, because a lot of people are like, yeah, they did all this. And don't you think that it would come out that if they did all this, somebody would say, oh, it's a big hoax? Well, no, it's not a hoax. It's not a hoax at all. They're just going someplace else, and they're telling you it's the moon. And yeah, it's as simple as that. That's why all this stuff is really happening. It's just not what you think it is. So back to Angkor Wat. I also see that there were 5 different civilizations, 5 different civilizations residing in Angkor Wat from the very beginning, who built it, and then reset, and then reset, and then reset, and then reset. That's what I'm seeing. So Angkor Wat was initially a power generating earthen technology, and just like the pyramids, and those original beings, a lot of them went outside of this snow globe. They were just like, time to go someplace else. Most advanced beings who once inhabited this snow globe are not here anymore. And the reason they're not here is because there's no stability here. You're not going to try to create a thriving civilization when this place keeps getting reset. It's not a good idea to have long-term goals in a place that's going to constantly be reset because of the topology of what comes in and goes out. So there's like an ebbing and flowing of waters here. There's a place in the bottom of Africa that goes out that you're not supposed to know about. It's around the Antarctic area. Except the Antarctic area isn't one place. It's this. And it's like a funnel. You can go in and out of it. So that also allows water in and water out. That's a lot of the ebbing and flowing. There are underneath caverns in our snow globe that also, when the waters ebb and flow, they come in and out, and they come up through the ground. That's why you can have, what's that called, where the equifax or equifaction, or where the water comes up out of the ground. Well, where's all that water coming from? It's coming from the bigger Earth. There are huge monumental seas out there, and just with the tides, but their tides are not, our tides are small, in a day. These tides run over 100 centuries to go like this. Yeah, or maybe even 150 years to go in and out. So these tides are so enormous that ebbing and flowing is slow, which covers a big time frame. Where in our little snow globe, we have ebbing and flowing in a 24-hour range, That's when the tide goes in and the tide goes out. But yeah, these beings that established this snow globe, yeah, they're out of here. There's no stability here. Oh, Lord, I'm all over the map this morning. So Angkor Wat, 5 civilizations. It was a generating system. Interesting. I guess I won't ramble on and on too much more. I would like to get into more depth on certain topics. Angkor Wat, I will say this. When I look into their daily lives, I'm going to add this in there. They were scantily dressed because, of course, they did not have the temperature. And when I looked into that, I found out why we now have this cold, and hot. Like I said, every one of our snow globes is regulated. They're all manufactured to be whatever system. I do see that in our snow globe, they ended up putting in freezer units. I don't know what else to call them. Big, long, they create cold in our snow globe. And when they did this, it was another takedown of humanity, and I'll tell you why. And not just humanity, but our ecosystem. Everyone thinks we have to have these 4 seasons, and that's not true. This place initially was 1 season, and it just was flourishing all the time. But AI had come in and needed to get rid of the vegetation. So the first thing that AI did was install these freezer units, and now we have cold. Well, what does cold do? When you have cold, you are going to do one main thing. And yes, of course, we're going to have cold and blah, 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 but there's one main thing you're going to do. You're going to dry up the atmosphere. The cold dries up the atmosphere. And through this cooling system, you can now regulate areas that are not going to be having vegetation because you're drying it up in the atmosphere. And you're going to create deserts. That's one way to create deserts. Have the cold, cold, cold. I don't know if anyone knows about this, if I'm the first to say this, and everyone's like, no, cold doesn't. Yes, cold dries up the atmosphere. And if you wanted to create deserts, you're going to create cold, really, really cold. It also wreaks havoc on the stability of the entire snow globe. Because when you're having all these seasons, all of a sudden now you're putting this artificial cold in when it was set up to be a certain type of ecosystem, and you're screwing up the atmosphere because now you're creating these winds and what have you that are creating storms and creating dry spots, and then you're going to have places that just have inundated rain because of the dry spots. You're really screwing the eco. When the ecosystem was initially only supposed to be 1 terranium temperature. Yeah, that doesn't help either. Also, when I look into why they put the freezer units in, some of the subsidiary reasons were to create sickness. When you put in really, really cold, now you're not functioning on the provided ecosystem that it was set at 72 in the 70s. It was literally the low 70s to about 78. I think that was the high, something like that. This is why you have the prairie res map. Why you could see everything at one point didn't have ice and all that on it because we didn't have the freezer units. And this is why shenanigans are going on. So yeah, basically AI came in with a certain faction of Reptilian, and they're like, okay, we're going to take over the snow globe. We're going to create these freezer units. We're going to dry this place out. We're going to cause havoc on the inhabitants. Yeah, pretty nasty. Okay, I have so digressed from Angkor Wat. Okay, well, I guess that'll be it for me today because I am so rambling on and on. All right then, everybody, have a great day. Bye.